Welcome everyone to this webinar on electricity wholesale market integration. I'm Patrick Luijks, team leader of the market monitoring team in the electricity department at ACER. And I'm happy to see that, well, numbers are rising, but happy to see we're already over 100 participants in this webinar. And happy to see this raised so much interest. I'll keep the introduction quite short because I want to spend as much time as possible for the presentation and the possible questions and answers. But before I go to the actual introduction, a bit of housekeeping and going through the agenda. So after my opening remarks, I'll pass the floor to my colleagues to present the findings of the first bit of the first part of the report. After which our colleague Onena from the energy community will give her the input on the part energy community help drafting. Following after these two presentations, we'll have quite long Q&A session, for which I'm hoping all of you will participate quite actively. And then we'll finish with some closing remarks at the end of the hour. Some housekeeping rules. For those who have attended webinars of us in the past, well, it's kind of the same as every other webinar we've had. We closed the chat in Teams, but we have a Slido communication tool where you can ask questions that we then can take up at the Q&A session. I invite you to already start asking questions as soon as they pop up. Don't wait till the Q&A because that allows us then to have already questions when we start the Q&A session. That's always nice to have a couple of questions ready for when the Q&A opens. I know the first question is always hard, so don't hesitate. Click the link that you see here or that you have in the chat. It will take you to the Slido app where you can raise questions, and you can also like questions of others. So we see which questions are definitely going to be asked to the presenters. The webinar is being recorded, and the recording and the slides of the webinar will be published probably somewhere tomorrow. So all those who registered will get this via their registration email. We have muted, and we also ask you to keep yourself muted during the presentation. We'll have the Q&As through the Q&A Slido page. If needed, if there's a need for a complex question during Q&A session, we can also open the mic to people from the floor. But let's say as a rule, we'll take the questions from the Q&A. And I think that's it. Maybe for the webinar, it will be also probably on YouTube, posted on YouTube, so we can also, that's where you can see the recording. And I think that's all on the housekeeping rules, which then takes me to the actual content of the webinar. So this is now the second webinar of the team on the reports that we've been having drafted during the year. The monitoring of ACER is aiming to identify barriers for market integration, in particular for electricity markets, because we work in the electricity department. So far, this has resulted in a couple of reports this year. In February, there was a report on key market developments. In July, we had two reports, one on the analysis of emergency measures and one on the analysis of cross-zonal capacities and the 70% rule, as some of you might know it. And in December, we will publish another report on the barriers for demand response. So this is the report on the functioning of electricity markets. It looks into how the electricity markets have been evolving over the years, and all of this in the context of the European Green Deal, which aims at transforming the energy system and particularly the electricity system into clean, affordable, and reliable electricity for the European markets. The report, as those who have read it will have noticed, does not only focus on the EU countries. There's also a whole chapter on the energy community countries, which will also be presented today. That's in terms of introduction of the report. But also let me introduce the speakers of today. First, we have two ACER colleagues, Thomas Keriu and Lars Breckenfelder, who will present the work on the day-ahead intraday forward balancing markets and some more of this report. Thomas has coordinated the work on the market integration report, and he's been with ACER for many years already. He first worked on gas and then on electricity markets regulation, and now has been involved into market monitoring. Lars has participated on the work of this report, but also on other reports of the team, and he contributed to various chapters in these and other reports. And then after the ACER colleagues have done their presentation, Olena Antonova will present the parts that have been coordinated with the energy community. Olena is the Energy Community Regulatory Board electricity market expert within the Energy Community Secretariat, and she's focusing on coordination with NRAs and electricity market regulation. So after having introduced the speakers, I now give the floor to Thomas to take it from here. Thomas, you can take over from here.
Thank you, Patrick. So, as Patrick said, we'll now focus on market integration before moving to the energy community topics. Despite difficult times and trying to look on the bright side, there may be room for cautious optimism in the energy sector. The surge in energy prices driven by the gas crunch has been a major concern, as you know. However, European cooperation on emergency measures somehow mitigated the impact on consumers. As mentioned by Patrick, we published earlier this year dedicated reports on market fundamentals and the emergency measures that are hyperlinked here. The key takeaway from the crisis and that we want to insist on today is the resilience shown by interconnected electricity markets. Market integration played a crucial role in managing the crisis and ensuring the security of energy supply. So that's why this report, which we are presenting today, tracks the progress and limitation in the existing European market integration. I will now give the floor to Lars, who will present a bit into more details the technical aspects of this report.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. I will now present the progress made in 2022 despite the energy crisis. So the crucial milestone that the European energy market reached in June 2022 was the go live of core flow-based market coupling. So the flow-based market coupling allocates transmission capacities at the same time as the market clearing takes place, which is a deviation from the usual available transfer capacity with capacity allocation prior to market clearing. The flow-based market coupling ensures greater cross-border transport capacity through the closer integration of capacity allocation and market activity. Please have a look on the figure on the top right, where we represent the EU day-ahead market areas that were coupled in 2010 on the left and 2022 on the right side. Day-ahead and intraday markets are now fully coupled with a pan-European platform for the allocation of cross-border capacities. Thereby, we have implicit coupling being established, and what's left is the introduction of intraday auctions. 4 pan-European balancing allocation platforms have also been established, which still need to be deployed across the whole of Europe. In the table on the bottom right, we see the TSOs operational on European balancing platforms in 2022, starting with the Picasso platform for the automatic frequency restoration reserves and the Marie, which is the platform for the manual frequency restoration reserves. Both were established in 2022, and we observe a rather low participation of TSOs and corresponding member states. Next, we have the Terra platform, which represents the replacement reserves. And this is active for quite a while by now. And we don't really expect much more participation here by transmission system operators because not all the member states have the replacement reserves available. And in the last column, we see the International Grid Control Corporation, IGCC, which was established in 2017. This is the European platform for imbalance netting. And here we see a higher participation of 21 TSOs. So those platforms will enable TSOs to procure balancing products from all over Europe, and which will eventually allow cheaper procurement of balancing products. And it might also dampening the effect of prices on energy prices. The real challenge in market integration is ensuring cross-zonal capacity where and when needed, meaning the capacity allocation is one important side of the coin, but it is also substantial for an effective and efficient European electricity market to ensure commercial capacity availability, so the active energy trading. On the next slide, I want to focus further on the low TSO engagement of the new balancing platforms, which also led to data limitations. So in 2022, it was very marking that all the large price incidences of balancing services. So those prices were increasing a lot, which was mostly driven by the war in the Ukraine. The figures on that slide show the average prices for balancing capacity per year and per reserve type in the European market. So all the way from 2019 in gray to 2022 in green. So this graph is illustrating balancing capacity, and balancing means the cost of reserving electricity. And this graph doesn't show the full picture of the market due to data limitations as mentioned above. Please note the jump in the prices for AFRR in 2022 compared to 2019. So the main achievements in 2022 were definitely the go live of Picasso and Marie platform. However, we observed a low TSO participation and regular price incidents. Now I will give the floor back to Thomas, who will present further insights into these price incidents. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars. So as last mentioned, our analysis of platform was limited this year. Nevertheless, our report includes a case study on the Picasso platform introduced in June 2022. The platform connects European national balancing markets for AFR, automatic frequency restoration reserves. Since launched, it has encountered price incidents, such as the one on the slide indicating possible challenges. In this price incident in Austria, there were significant price differences with neighboring zones, limited access to said zone, and the possibility for internal exchanges within those zones. That's why we conclude that this may reveal inefficiencies in the current market design. Indeed, during this price incidents, Austria could benefit from its neighbors with better use of cross-border capacity. We intend to dig further on these incidents in further reports. So compared to previous editions, the report now focuses in more depth on balancing and forward markets, as we see that it's the next big step in market integration. We have the usual indicators. So forward trading liquidity decreased due to increasing collateral requirements, but the ahead intraday trading remained stable with participants shifting to spot or bilateral trading. Beyond the liquidity, it's not on the slide, but I want to mention that the report includes an analysis on the value of long-term transmission rights by comparing their prices to forward market spreads and assessing export risk premiums for spot price differentials. Details of the analysis are, of course, available in the report, but its main conclusion is that long-term transmission rights are likely undervalued and suggests that future policies should promote their cost-effective use in hedging strategies. Now we come back to the main issue preventing market integration and one of ACER's favorites. I think there's no presentation where we don't talk about it, the lack of coastal capacity available for trade. We thereby complement the analysis published in July, as mentioned by Patrick and hyperlinked here, with elements of analysis on loop flows observed and the volumes and costs of remedial actions in 2022. Here again, the urgent need for more cross-border capacity in the EU short-term power market, coupled with inefficient bidding zones, has increased the need for remedial actions. And what we see is that in 2022, remedial action costs exceeded 5 billion euros due to high energy prices and probably the need to meet the 70% cross-border capacity target. This trend will continue with more renewables in the system unless structural changes are made, such as investment or bidding zone reconfiguration. This was just an overview, and we invite you to look in the report for more details, but we want to stress the main conclusions, which are that we recommend to strengthen forward market development, to consider slower balancing reserves after the use of AFR, automatic frequency restoration reserves, to manage price incidents maybe more efficiently. Of course, to increase cross-border capacity following ACER's guidance, and to control redispatch costs, minimize renewable curtailment, and align thereby with the energy transition target. Thank you. I will now give the floor to Olena for the presentation of the work on energy community.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you, colleagues. Good morning. A real quickly introduction to the energy community. Our organization since 2006 brings together EU and its neighbors to create the integrated European pan-energy market. We have 9 contracting parties, 6 Western Balkans countries, plus Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova. Energy community operates via the Energy Community Secretariat based in Vienna, and our tasks here are to monitor and report on the level of the implementation of the Energy Community acquis. Additionally, we have powers of enforcement of Energy Community acquis implementation with legal procedures of basically opening cases against contracting parties. Energy Community Regulatory Board is a separate institution established under the Energy Community Treaty, and its task is to monitor, support, and coordinate the regulatory aspects and certain aspects of market development. For 2022, the key highlights for our markets are similar to those of EU, and basically our markets have been heavily impacted, of course, by the energy crisis, by the war of aggression against Ukraine. On a more positive note, we had a big step up in adoption of the EU Energy Community acquis, which is a 4th clean energy package, including the electricity market integration package as its very important part. When it comes to energy crisis, unlike in EU, of course, markets were hit by price surges, but unlike in EU, our markets did not come up with a unified set of measures. Still, a very similar set of measures to tackle the crisis and pricing impacts were adopted by the governments and NRAs at national level. And they amounted to price regulation, designation of local producers to supply electricity, to provide electricity at even some cases regulated prices to end users, direct budget support to consumers, and measures incentivizing a decrease of electricity consumption. For Ukraine, of course, on top of the energy crisis and on top of the second wave of prices increase because of war, huge challenge was basically sustaining the operation of the electricity market which has been working in compliance with the third energy package requirements since 2019. The challenges amounted to drop in demand, significant drop in collection rates, loss of physical infrastructure, and high risks of security of supply. Special support has been designed by the energy community towards Ukraine, and various tools were applied and are being applied here. The key milestone in this crisis situation was the emergency synchronization with continental Europe of Ukraine and Moldova control block. A big step up for the energy community in the end of 2022 was adoption of the clean energy package, the new acquis. The process began back in 2021. Here is the summary of the process, and was finalized in 2022. So firstly, the adapted version of the Electricity Directive and Risk Preparedness Regulation became a part of the acquis, and then in the end of 22, it was complemented by Electricity Regulation, ACER Regulation, and electricity market guidelines and respective network codes. I don't want to spend time on this, they are all presented on the slide. The deadline for implementation of the new acquis for our countries is still December 2023. In terms of key market developments and highlights, some of them did take place in 22. For some of them, the grounds were laid in 22. Big development for our markets actually in 2020-23 is the launch of the day-ahead markets operation in Albania, Montenegro, and North Macedonia. So we have this segment in operation since spring 2023. In Georgia, all market rules are in place. The go-live still of the market has been postponed. For Moldova, market rules came into force in middle of 2022, and bilateral market segment is operational. For Ukraine, the market model remained in place. Still, certain regulatory decisions were made of how the market is supposed to operate in course of technical emergency designated by TSO, basically because of loss of physical infrastructure and load on the system. Another big step up for our countries is now, again, development on NEMA designation, the grounds for which were laid in 2022. So NEMA were designated during 2020-23, already in Albania, Kosovo, North Macedonia, and Serbia. When it comes to balancing mechanism, for Albania, balancing market started operation in spring of 2023. For Bosnia and Herzegovina, bilateral exchanges of balancing energy already took place with Serbia and Montenegro. In Georgia, all the regulatory background was laid for TSO's responsibility. Rules are in place, however, only dry run regime is now happening. For Moldova, also pushed by the crisis in 2022 and the need to ensure energy security, TSO has been made responsible for calculation and bidding of balancing costs, and market participants became responsible for their balancing costs that they cause. In Serbia, 2 imbalanced netting projects were already implemented in 2022, one at regional and one at European level. When it comes to REMIT, for the energy community, the so-called REMIT Light applies. And basically is in place for all of the countries except for Moldova in electricity. The draft law is currently under development, and we hope to see REMIT applied in Moldova for electricity by the end of this year. For Ukraine, amid of war, transposition of REMIT took place. The version of REMIT is a bit wider than REMIT Light requirements. It is possible now to see the registers of market participants at the websites of the national NRAs, as well as at the web page of the Energy Community Regulatory Board. On cross-border capacity allocation and connection codes, in all of the energy community countries, the connection codes for connection of generation and demand have been transposed in different forms, including by direct applicability of the codes according to provisions of legislation in North Macedonia. In Ukraine, while explicit transposition is not in place, still the key provisions of the codes are reflected in the respective grid codes. On cross-border capacity allocation for Bosnia and Herzegovina, with Montenegro and Croatia, allocation for long and short term is regionally coordinated via SICAO. This is also the case for Montenegro, except for the border with Serbia. For Moldova, from October 2022, the coordinated allocation is taking place with Romania, and with Ukraine, it is a unilateral allocation procedure. For Ukraine, in course of 2022, also grounds were laid for pushing through the joint capacity allocation, while in course of the year, allocation was unilateral on with member states and with Moldova. As we speak right now, only last week, after all the preparatory work, the first joint capacity allocation procedure was applied between Ukraine and Romania. So good grounds laid in 2022 for this progress. For RES development, we have different situation across contracting parties. Again, many changes already in 2023. Especially, maybe there is a sense to highlight progress in Serbia, where feed-in tariff support has been cancelled since 2020, and from 2023, auctions for allocation of market premium for RES for quotas established by legislation have been successfully implemented. For Albania, the legislation has been changed already in 2023 to market price premium. For Bosnia and Herzegovina, already in 2020, with 40% of RES share in the total energy output, the legislation is also now under development for Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina to switch to market premium. I think they already changed the law. While for Republika Srpska, already in 2022, the law was changed to enable market premium and full balancing responsibility for RES projects. For Kosovo, maybe there is a sense to point out the RES law for market premium has just been adapted, and the first project for 100 megawatt of the first auction has been announced still in 2023. Also, maybe going back to Albania, 2 successful projects were already launched for 100 and 140 megawatt and are expected to be in operation at some point in 2023. We also observe a trend of migration of RES participants who were working under the support scheme in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Montenegro from the feed-in support scheme to free market. When it comes to Ukraine, new legislation was applied in 2023 after it's been grounds for development of which were laid still in 2022. And that introduces the guarantees of origin, circulation, and the system of their issuance with the regulator as the designated issuing body. The self-consumption concepts were introduced by legislation, and clarification on auctions on market premium were also in the law. Still, so far, practically the feed-in RES projects are mostly in place. That will be it for the summary on the energy community, and I will be happy to answer your questions. We also here at the energy community looking for cooperation with ACER in next year with our contribution to the market monitoring report. And thank you, colleagues, for your support this year.
Thank you, Olena. Let me take back control presentation. So that brings, and I also see that we're very well on time with the agenda. So that brings us to the Q&A session. I've been looking at the Slido, and I see some of you already have there to ask questions. Strongly push you to also, all of you, don't hold back. You can ask the questions. Also, very useful for us is any feedback. So everything that you think, oh, this is missing this report, or it would be nice to have this kind of analysis looking into barriers. Also very open to receive this feedback, because we're also now finalizing our work plan for next year, also on this report. So any question, any feedback that you want to give, it's well received. And then maybe having said that, and also looking at the Slido page in the background, I can maybe ask already the first question that's been asked. And I will, but before I do this, also want to highlight, for answering the questions, I will also rely on the whole team, not just the people presented, who presented the two parts before, but also, so not just Olena, Lars, and Thomas, but also Ignacio, Christina, and Jill, who have been working on this report and who might be the more suitable person to respond to one or the other question. So don't be surprised if you see a new face answering the question. It's because they're the most experts to answer it. But the first question I will ask to Thomas, and Thomas, if you're willing to take this one. So what is ACER's view on the future outlook of balancing platform implementation in the EU? So Thomas, if you have any views on this.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I see there is a lot of interest for this case study, so it was a good idea to put it in. And I would thank colleagues who contributed for it in particular. The first question about the implementation, well, it always boils down to defining what is implementation, and we think that the go live of the platforms is a good sign. However, as we said, then the question is when this platforms become fully efficient. And for this, as we said in the presentation, we see that the offer needs to increase by more activity of the TSOs. What we see today is that a lot of TSOs are members but are not active in the platform. And indeed, I guess the question here is when will be when will these TSOs be active in a way that is sufficient to harvest all the benefit from these platforms? And as of today, the analysis is too partial, and for us to be able to conclude.
Maybe a follow-up question on this. It's someone wondered why the bidding results other than Germany and Austria are not available. And maybe Thomas, you can also.
Yes, that's actually a good question again, because it allows me maybe to clarify one thing. The case study is about Austria and Germany, but the problem we do not see as, or the problem, if any, or the inefficiency we don't see as being specific to Austria and Germany. But indeed, the benefit of these platforms was to allow additional transparency, and in that case, it allowed us to conclude as to an inefficiency, but only because we had access to the information from those members that were active in the platform at the time in 2022. And there are more members actually than Germany and Austria. In the slide that I presented, there is also data for Czech Republic, and since then we also have Italy. And indeed, this data is available. So it's not only about Germany and Austria, but we focus on that for the case study that we have at hand.
So the message is also, in the coming years, you can expect more of this for more countries because more data will be available. And maybe still looking for some feedback also here, maybe more ideas for concrete analysis will have been implemented. There's also a question, maybe to take a sidestep from the Picasso and balancing questions, a question on clarifying on slide 11 on the relative performance of the member states in the context of remedial actions. Someone was wondering if the more performant, what was to be understood by the more performant member states. So maybe Ignacio, who has been working on this particular aspect, wants to clarify this one.
Yes, I can. Perhaps we can bring out the figure in the slide, if you don't mind, just to see what we're talking about. It's slide 11. So indeed, in this figure, we show in a darker blue the member states and TSOs that have a larger share of remedial actions activated in 22 with respect to their total electricity demand. We cannot consider that to be a relatively worse performing member state or TSO, the one that activated more remedial actions, because it must be said that activating remedial actions is a legal requirement to guarantee the zonal capacity targets. So the 70% requirement is to be guaranteed through the activation of remedial actions. That being said, the higher use of remedial actions is linked to higher levels of congestion within a bidding zone. So it might point to a poorer configuration of the bidding zone of that member state and TSO. So not to be taken as a worse performance, the ones that have a higher share of remedial actions, but indeed it might point to higher levels of congestion and thus a relatively poorer configuration of the bidding zone.
Okay, thank you, Ignacio. And I see inevitably we have more balancing questions, and more again on Picasso. So I think I'll have to call in Thomas on this one again. So what is ACER's overview of the efficiency of Picasso? As have we seen more volatile balancing prices? Just even looking at Germany, not just during the time of war, but also outside of price spikes. So is there any explanation for this one?
Here again, we have to define efficiency, but I will have to provide again a rather general answer, and I apologize for that. But we only see today a few participants that are active, and it's even more true as the study is for the year 2022, and since then more members have become active. So maybe we should expect to harvest more benefit when more members become active. That said, an immediate benefit was the added transparency that allowed the case study. So what I can say is that we consider that it is a progress, but that we're not fully there yet. I invite my colleague Gilles if he wants to step in to provide more elements of answers to do so. But he doesn't have to.
It doesn't. It's not a must. It can also be, if there's more questions, the chat is also, people can also ask follow-up questions, of course, in Slido, and then we can see how we can address them. Of course, at some point, if it becomes really technical, I'll have to maybe stop it a bit, and then we can take it offline. I also see there's a question for Olena regarding the energy community, and it's that the energy community has just published a report on achieving the 70% target for electricity interconnection capacities. And maybe Olena, if you are the right person to ask, if you have some comments on the main findings of this report. Is there anything you can share on this?
I'm not a direct person to ask on this report right now, so I wouldn't undertake a comment on this at this stage. So thank you for the question. I can come back on that a bit later in writing if that's relevant.
Okay, so I will follow on with the next question. Which is, I'm sorry, just reading from there was a question also on LT, long-term transmission rights. So why are long-term transmission rights generally underpriced? And so maybe what else is needed to encourage using long-term transmission rights to mitigate risks? And now I'm hesitating to ask this question to Thomas or Ignacio. Thomas, if you're comfortable taking it, you wanting to take it?
I can also invite Ignacio then to complement, to correct me if I say something that is not fully accurate. But we compared long-term transmission rights to forward spread and then exposed to the head spread, and simply we assessed whether they were a cheaper mean to hedge price variations, and our conclusion was that they are. And I invite you to go in the report where we have nice graphs that simply show that. You can see the comparison. This raises the question if why, if there is a tool that is available, it is not fully used, and there we can only at this stage have a guess, and that's where maybe we think that maybe it's not known by all market participants, and that its use needs to be promoted.
Thank you, Thomas. I also see there's a quite general question on how ACER sees profit opportunities for renewable energy source investments, despite expected wholesale prices and renewable energy sources capture prices decreasing over time in the next 20-30 years. So maybe if I have to translate it, maybe there's more a question about cannibalization effects of renewable investments. It's a quite general question, so I'm not sure on this analysis on who to give it to, but maybe this is more one of the questions that we would more take as a suggestion for further analysis. It's a quite relevant question. Cannibalization is something that we have on our radar, and it's definitely something that we would be looking to in the next couple of years. Also, maybe nuancing the cannibalization is not a given as such. There's a bit of opportunities and threats in this topic. So also here, if there's any ideas, any needs in terms of analysis that we should be focusing on, we're always very much open to listen to it. But it is definitely one of the things we'll be looking at, the impact of renewables in the coming years in our reports. Moving on to the next question. Are the cross-border transmission rights, transmission quantities, expected to increase, and how will this affect energy statistics, international trade, and gross domestic product in general? And I think this one is right up the alley for Ignacio. So Ignacio, if you're willing to take this one on how increased cross-border transmission rights would impact basically electricity trading and welfare in general.
Indeed. So the first question, I would say it's an easy yes. So are the cross-border transmission quantities or capacities expected to increase? That's a clear yes. There are several regulatory targets that are pushing TSOs not just to build more transmission lines between bidding zones, but also to use the available infrastructure more efficiently. The main one being the 70% requirement, the minimum 70% requirement. This 70% requirement has been implemented in a, let's say, in a gradual manner, in the sense that TSOs are allowed to progress towards that value where they need to make available 70% of the available physical interconnection capacity to the market, progressively up until 2026. So we are seeing increases of capacity year by year up until 2026. And how that will how that will affect cross-border trade, of course, it will increase the level of integration in the European electricity markets. We will see a lot more cross-border trade. As of the effects that might have to GDP growth, it's a bit of a larger leap to make, but for sure it will increase the levels of market integration in the EU.
Maybe Ignacio, a follow-up question on this one, maybe a tricky one, more a legal question. You refer to the 70% target, I think explicitly or implicitly. So what are the sanctions? 70% target or not using sufficient remedial actions. Maybe that is also something you can expand on a bit.
That is a tricky topic. So ACER performs monitoring of the fulfillment of this 70% requirement, and we publish a report every year. The one we published this year was published in July. But the compliance of TSOs with that requirement is fully in the hands of NRAs. So it's actually NRAs the one that have to assess whether TSOs have complied with the requirements of that provision and impose the necessary sanctions if there's no compliance. We have not seen any sanctions thus far, but it would be in the hands of NRA to decide to implement those if needed.
Thank you, Ignacio. And then I see two questions for Elena. So Elena, if you don't mind taking the next two ones. The first one being, how far is Ukraine with implementing short-term market rules in the gas sector? Okay, maybe this is a gas sector question, so I'm not sure if you're the right person to ask, but this is asked regarding nominations beyond 2024. So is this something you can address or refer to?
No. Thank you for the good question, but no, I'm not prepared to address this one.
So is it okay if the person's interested that they contact
Of
you
course.
and see if they
my colleagues who are responsible for gas, I'm sure will have the feedback.
And then one that is about electricity, maybe also quite tricky one to know. It's will Ukraine join soon and use the JAO for capacity allocation, so the Joint Allocation Office for capacity allocation on all borders with Slovakia, Poland, Romania, and Hungary? Is there...
This I can provide a bit more insights. Thank you for this question. Indeed, as I mentioned in my presentation, recently the progress on joint capacity allocation exactly via JAO between Ukraine and Slovakia, Ukraine and Poland, and Ukraine and Romania is, I think, on the Ukrainian platform. And Hungary, these are underway. All the preparations are in place, and the public consultation of the allocation rules that have been agreed between the TSOs and the national NRAs, if I'm not mistaken, are now taking place at the JAO level. So yes, we are expecting soon allocation in joint procedure via JAO for Ukraine, Slovakia, Ukraine, Poland, and Ukraine, Hungary. For Ukraine, Romania, this joint allocation process that is in place, and as I mentioned, the auction already took place, is happening in the Ukrainian platform, if I'm not wrong. So good progress achieved in this sphere for this long project pending in Ukraine since 2015. I hope this answers the question.
Thank you, Elena. Sure it did. Then a first question on intraday markets. The question is, have there been analysis or insights on how the increasing trades on intraday markets after the single intraday coupling have impacted cross-border balancing services prices? Maybe Thomas, is that a question you're comfortable to take? So how the impact of intraday trading affected cross-border trading and prices? Is there any link that we can expand on, or?
Patrick, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I see the question.
So the impact of increase, the report showed about the increase of intraday market trading. So there's been more intraday market
have impacted
trading.
Cross-border balancing
Yes.
services prices. The problem with this was that so I think we're looking at two things here: the market integration in day ahead and intraday, which we've seen and resulted in, to some extent, price convergence in those timeframes. And the question now talks about the impact on balancing services prices. But there was, as Lars presented in this slide, there was an issue also with the increase in prices coming from the Ukraine war, which was another externality that resulted in higher prices. So I'm not sure if it's so easy to build a correlation between the two factors at this time. I don't think I could answer that question so straightforward.
Okay. But I think on this one, maybe also Ignacio's answer from before, that more capacity, so also for the cross-border balancing services, more capacity would always be flattening prices, which would always decrease volatility and increase efficiency. So everything, it's true for every market time frame as well. So as Thomas just answered, the analysis would be difficult, but in theory, one would expect that if there's less cross-border capacity for balancing services, the prices would be diverging more also for cross-border balancing services. Then another question on Picasso. So maybe this is again for Thomas or for Gilles to take. If the Picasso platform in general is seeing incidents, and assuming this could be due to the few number of participants, why did we not wait to go live instead of proceeding with 3 participants? Is that one?
Yes, it's a funny question because it's a question about transition, and it could sound a bit like if the new solution is not functional, why didn't we stick to the good old solutions? We could revert the question, why are the DSOs not more active on the platforms? And we think it's the most efficient way forward, and we think that part of the price, so part of the price incident is not due to the platform itself, but an issue with cross-border capacity and the fact that we have to improve that. And maybe there is a question of market design behind, but not intrinsically an issue with platforms. And indeed, as the offer grows, maybe these price incidents will be mitigated. We also offer a solution to use slower reserves as a potential way to mitigate that. But again, it doesn't question the platforms themselves.
Thank you, Thomas. I see there has been also a couple of questions on battery storage systems. And although I would be very willing to give it to someone in the panel, I think this kind of question is actually more of to be addressed in either the report of our adequacy colleagues. So on if it's about capacity markets, it's really more in the realm of the report that our colleagues published about a month ago, or if it's more about the way battery storage would be participating in the demand response, it's more something that we will then tackle in the report we publish in December, for which the webinar will be in January. So if you don't mind me not taking this question right now, but more referring to the upcoming report rather, where this actually is being addressed. Battery storage is actually being addressed in the December report. It's not something that we really have looked into for this market integration report. Then I'm looking if there's any questions left. I'm also looking at the time. I think question-wise, we're kind of depleted, unless my eyes are mistaking me. So if you don't mind, I will wrap up the session. I will wrap up the webinar. First of all, I want to thank you for this attendance and also to participation in the many questions that we received. I hope we were able to answer at least some of them. If not, don't hesitate to reach out to our mailbox and to continue asking questions, or maybe even giving us feedback on how we can improve our reports in the future. As a wrap up, I want to stress that the reports that we presented today was looking today ahead, intraday balancing forward markets in the EU, but also into the developments that are happening right now in the energy community countries. If there's maybe one lesson that we learned in this report, but also in previous reports that we've been publishing, is that integrated markets are working. We have them. Some of them are actually quite stable, have been working for some years now. They bring huge benefits in terms of enhanced resilience, trade and volatility dampening effects, and definitely beats the everyone being on their own approach that we would have had before all the market integration happening. So all of this that we're seeing now is enabling us to introduce renewables in the system, to enhance security of supply, to mitigate price volatility. And the crisis taught us valuable lessons. Yes, prices were going through the roof, but without the market integration, we would probably have seen much worse results. So if anything, the crisis taught us the market integration did work within its limits, of course, but it did dampen some of the very adverse effects. The one thing that we will need and keep on needing for in the future is maximum availability of cross-zonal transmission capacity, because our markets can only work up until the level that, well, exchange between them is possible. With the upcoming surge in renewables, both this interconnectivity and flexibility, which is also something we look into our reports, will be key. And the good news is these two things, interconnectivity and flexibility, will also be the things that we'll be heavily looking into our next year's monitoring reports. So also here, if you have any good suggestions, any feedback on what this definitely should be including, we're always open to receive it. Until then, I thank you again for your attendance, and I wish you a good afternoon and goodbye.